Welcome to the Craftsman Founder Podcast, hosted by Lucas Carlson. Every week, we talk to founders, entrepreneurs, and those who've made a craft out of creating companies and enterprises. Listen every week to get ideas for starting, promoting, and growing your business. There are no shortcuts, just good old-fashioned hard work and craft. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's interview.
Hello, this is Lucas Carlson from the Craftsman Founder Podcast. Today I'm interviewing Ryan Orbuch. Now Ryan's a cool guy who built an iPhone app that's been used over 1 million times. The idea is that it's kind of a to-do list for procrastinators. And it was featured as the #1 productivity app in the App Store. You can actually find it if you type finish in the app search. You should totally check it out. It's really neat because he actually received an Apple Design Award in 2013 because it's such a great application. And he was covered in New York Times, TechCrunch, Forbes, CNET, Huffington Post, everywhere. He was all over the net, featured on Bloomberg TV and Fox News. Ryan gave a TED Talk. He's worked with Techstars Boulder. And what you might be surprised to hear about is that he's not only done all this cool stuff, but he's still just a senior in high school. He's a senior at Boulder High School. And this guy he's got a gut instinct for things that many people spend years hoping for. He naturally has figured out how to do some stuff, and I want to pick his brain and figure out how did he do this? How did he get profiled in New York Times? How did he build an app in one of the most competitive areas of building apps in the App Store? And how does he think about building stuff like that? So Ryan, thanks for coming on the show. Can you tell us about your background?
Totally. Thanks so much, Lucas. You made it sound very fancy and like I actually know what I'm talking about, which is vaguely disconcerting. But yeah, so basically I actually finished up high school a few months back and basically just moved out to San Francisco about a month ago. I'm in my swanky / cheap new place and have been really... Yeah, I'm down in like Potrero Hill, Dogpatch, like nice. Right near 22nd Street, which is nice. Yeah, it's a very like interesting neighborhood. Like we have a random collection of things. It's like 5 different hipster coffee shops, like a couple like childcare things, like a big ornate ice cream place, like a big church. Like I don't know.
How does San Francisco feel after moving from Boulder?
It's cool. I've been out here a fair bit with Finish and with some press stuff and that kind of thing. So it's not like I'm totally not knowing my way around. But it's different. I think even more different than the city itself is just moving. Because like I never really moved before. Like I was born in Boulder, grew up there, and yeah, I was pretty used to just being in one place. So it's an interesting experience to like realize I like now live somewhere else.
Well, first of all, congratulations on graduating.
It was surprisingly barely not, but yeah.
But a lot of people, they spend all of their lives thinking, that's such a great idea, somebody should build it. And when you had this idea, you decided, hey, I'm actually going to build this. So what motivates you to build your ideas? What is it that makes you want to not just have ideas, but go out and build them?
I think there's a couple pieces to it. First of all, I think even most people who do go out and build their ideas don't do it on their own. With Finish, it was myself and my friend Michael. Or with, any company you see where it's someone trying to, build their own solution to a problem, it's rare that it's on their own. It's easier for press to make it look like that, which is a whole other story. But I think one piece is just that you have people with you. And then the other side of it is, I think, goes back to just how much you personally care about the problem. Because there's like varying levels of like saying like, ooh, this is a good idea, someone should build it. Like, I still say that about tons of things and don't build them. Like, it's not everything. I think it's just how much you personally care about the problem and how much you feel like it's not going to get done otherwise. Like, there's plenty of stuff of like, gee, someone should build this, and you know, like, it'll be a thing eventually and whatever. Just deal with waiting or do it yourself and get it now. But there's the other side where you're like, if I don't do this, I don't know if anyone's gonna. Or like, maybe someone is, but I'm not confident they'll do it nicely. So it's like in my interest to make it.
Makes sense.
That's how I think about it, I guess.
And what makes you feel like a lot of people, they say that's a good idea, but then they say, like, I'm not, like, who am I to build that? Why should I even try? Because it's like, it's been done 1,000 times before by people who know better than I do.
The internet, that was true. Like, yeah, I think up until recently, it didn't make a lot of sense for some random guy with an idea to go try to build it. You know, unless you had, you know, a that your dad owned or, you know, something like that, it didn't make a lot of sense. I think it still can be slow to adjust to the fact that that's just not the case now. So, one, it's like it's more of a recent thing that was a thing that would make sense to pursue. And two is that, wait, what was the question again?
I think
I'm like thinking through all this stuff, and I'm like, oh shit.
Basically, the question is, what gave you the power to feel like, you know, this might have been done before, but I think I can do it better?
I mean, there wasn't much opportunity cost to trying. Like, I didn't really have much to lose with it. Like, if after a couple of weeks or after a few months it seemed like it wasn't going to work and it wasn't going to be any better, I could just stop. Like, I didn't raise money. Like, I wasn't forced to do it. Like, it didn't feel like it was going to be some huge deal when we started.
Yeah.
Which was nice in the sense that, like, if it seemed like it wasn't going to work, we could just bail and no one knew, so no one would care and whatever.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, they inflate in their head. They think that there's a lot more risk than there really is. And the downside of things falling apart, just get a job or do another idea. It's not that.
Like, in some cases, there is risk, though. Like, if you would be otherwise, you know, quitting your job and have to support a family and that kind of thing, like, that's a pretty legit risk that you should, like, seriously consider. But, I mean, if you're my age or that's not the case, yeah, it's weird. I think we like systemically overestimate risk in a lot of places and systemically underestimate it in others. And I've been wanting to like write up a whole thing on this because it's very weird to me.
Oh yeah, there's some excellent books about that. So you did a great TED Talk, and you were originally going to call it "What You Suck At Is Awesome." So can you tell us why? What does it mean?
Call it that, and then I went to the TEDx people, and they're like, "Yeah, dude, we like you, but no." And I'm like, "Aw, like, come on now."
Well,
But
I'll give you that stage. So the TEDx people said no. What does that mean?
well, they didn't quite say no. They're just like, "Are you sure you don't have anything better?" And I'm like, "Okay." They're like, "If you really want," I'm like, "All right, that's not encouraging." So why I was gonna call it that, and I like briefly reference this in the talk. And I'll go into why I didn't like how that talk turned out in a second. That's a whole other thing. But so kind of where I'm coming from with that is that there's a difference between just sucking at something, and then sucking at something, but also being fairly self-aware about it. And the latter is kind of what I was going for. So I think what that means to me is that, like, by facing a problem yourself, you're just inherently better at thinking about it. Like, maybe I would be great at B2B ad sales, but, like, I could never motivate myself to start a thing with that because, like, that's not something I personally have ever dealt with. And, like, we have ads and finish and stuff, and, like, I've seen a little bit of it, but, like, going back to what you said earlier, like how do you motivate yourself to do it? I think with me at least, it has to be a problem that I kind of personally work with, because that's the only way I can convince myself I'm like qualified to work on it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's about convincing yourself you're qualified to do it.
And telling yourself a different story.
You're dealing with day to day, and you are confident enough that other people are dealing with it day to day, whether they're just dealing with the same things as you, or they're your friends, or you're just like, well, I'm in this group, and I know it's a big enough group that there's probably others. And no, that's not real market research, but it's a starting point. Yeah, that's the only way I can like convince myself I should try a thing.
I love it.
I'm like, oh no.
Yeah. So can you tell us how you built Finish? Like a lot of people think, well, I'm going to spend 6, 9, 12 months working on this idea, and then I'll launch it to the world, and it'll be perfect. How did you build Finish?
Yeah, I pretty much thought that, except I thought it would take like a month, and then like it would work. Like in the early stages, the business plan was like, all right, let's make it, and it'll be 99 cents, and we'll get like 2 million downloads, and I'll get a new laptop, and yeah.
Sign me up for that. That sounds great.
I did buy myself a new laptop right after we launched. That was like the thing. So I'm like, I want to make videos. I'm like, but so the process basically started off 10th grade finals week, and this is kind of the usual press spiel, but it is true. 10th grade finals week, I was struggling with studying for stuff, struggling with procrastination, dealing with all, what I now know as like the metacognition around all my stuff. So like you got the this, and you got the this, and then this, and then this is due this day, but the teacher's actually kind of mad at me, so I should probably turn it in early, and I'm going to go take a nap and eat ice cream. Which is a weird, like, that series of, like, that thought process is a weird thing to me, because, like, it's something we all, like, awkwardly pretend doesn't happen. And I've never entirely known why that is. Maybe it's because, like, when you're older, you're supposed to pretend that kind of shit doesn't happen to you. But, that...
It never happens to me. Never.
Yeah. I need to finish. Gosh, moving on. The sass. So, I mean, the whole idea to me was that, like, that annoying metacognition, like, I and anyone else who's doing school or doing anything has better things to do than to deal with that, like, cognitive looping. And that, like, that on its own isn't a complex thing. It's pretty much just a series of tasks that should be able to be outsourced to your phone. Like, you shouldn't have to put any cognitive energy into that. And that was kind of the initial, once I thought through it a little more of like why this actually could be cool, the initial thing. I mean, the initial thing was just, we should have a thing with 3 terms and stuff slides around. I mean, that's still what it is. Like, that is the product. And then as I thought more about, why I think that's a reasonable idea, I kind of dove into it a little more and got a sense of, kind of the deeper idea behind it. But yeah, so that was the very beginning of 2012. That's so weird. So that was beginning of 2012, and then my friend Michael and I, he was on engineering, I was on design, UI, UX, concept-y stuff, everything else, and dipping into code rarely. I've gotten better and better on that front, but still consider myself like 90% a designer. So played around with it kind of throughout the spring. It was kind of my litmus test for any idea at this point, which I kind of initially played around with Finish, and now I use for kind of every idea I'm playing with, is you know how like it'll be like 3 a.m. and you'll come up with something and you'll like frantically buy the domain and think you're the next Steve Jobs, and then in the morning you're like, oh, I just wasted $8.
Yep.
The like, how long does it take for you to start feeling like you wasted $8? And do you? Because like with 90% of things I've ever thought of, it's been that, where I'm like, oh wait, yeah, that's dumb for all these reasons now that I'm not like on the idea high from it.
Yeah.
But Finish, it was like a couple months. I'm like, well, if it doesn't sound dumb yet, is it gonna? And like after a few months, I'm like, all right, at this point, with it still not sounding dumb or not sounding like super dumb, I guess we'll go for it. Like process of elimination that like it didn't start sounding lame. But that's what I use for every idea at this point. Like there's a lot I've been playing around with in the education space. I'm just kind of waiting till it starts to sound stupid, and if it doesn't, it's worth investigating.
What are you thinking around the education space? Do you have any ideas?
Yeah, lots of different stuff. This is going to take us so off topic that maybe we should do it at the end.
That's fine.
Okay, because I'm looking at our questions and I'm like, yeah, these are not going to get answered if we go into that. So, in terms of differentiating finish?
No, I'm just, let's go off on a tangent. Tell me about your passion. What?
I've been trying to avoid doing that. I've been trying to get better at noticing when I'm going to like totally screw up a discussion.
No. This is not screwing up. I'm curious.
Sweet. Thanks, dude. So education. This goes back to the whole problem recognition thing. And the like value in feeling personally attached to your problems / sucking at something. So I had a really rough time in high school, but I also had, so I went to your normal kind of rich white suburb public high school. You know, we were like about 2,000 kids, like I guess 80% white, 20% Latino, pretty normal suburban high school. And I came from a pretty normal suburban middle school. And freshman year was pretty crappy, as I think it is for everyone, and I don't see that as being a big deal. Sophomore year, I decided, like, this thing, like, I keep getting to, like, I've always been told I'm smart, and, like, I always got good grades and stuff, so I guess I should do that. So I did that. And I got, like, a 4.2 GPA or something, 10th grade. And it was actually halfway through that year that I started playing around with the idea of finish and blah, blah, blah. But and then that summer was a kind of had a big impact on me. I went to summer camp, I traveled a bunch, I thought through a lot of stuff. This was when we were starting to build finish, blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't come up with why I was getting good grades. Like, yeah, college, but that just felt so indirect to me. Of like, everyone's like, yeah, well, no one gets into Stanford. I'm like, oh, then, okay, whatever, like, why? So, I mean, I did it to, like, show myself that I could, and then didn't realize, I didn't see any value. Which was probably bad, and I probably should have been good and gotten good grades and stuff. But, and this was a big, like, stress point between me and parents, and the Times talked about it, and blah, 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 which was odd. But, so then 11th grade, I did mediocre, launched finish, blah, blah, blah. 12th grade grades were terrible, but I feel like I learned a lot. But that's just kind of the quick background on why I feel personally kind of enveloped in this problem. Ooh, I can develop. I should start saying that. Personally enveloped in this problem is that I've been trying to kind of cultivate this more and more, but I'm super, super, super into like sociology. And like whenever I walk into a party or something, I'll like stand by the door for the first like 5 or 10 minutes, just like kind of awkwardly, and just like watch like kind of how it progresses and watch like the social grouping, that kind of like, what's up? Like, are you drunk? I'm like, no, I'm just like watching, and they're like, you're a weirdo. But like, it's so funny because I see like education as a much larger system of this essentially, but like it's the kind of system and the kind of dynamical system where like everyone knows what's going on at a bigger level, but like kind of just fits themselves in. Like if you go to like a high school dance, like this is a perfect example of like the same thing where everyone knows, but it just knows they also play a part in it and just go with it. So like you'll have like at first, 7 p.m., 8 p.m., everyone's just like jumping because no one in high school knows how to dance and jumping seems to work, which is hilarious because I'm even bad at jumping. But you got everyone jumping, and then, a few minutes later, people start grinding, and then 10 minutes later, everyone's grinding. And it's just funny because you can stand on the side and just watch it progress. And you know exactly what's going to happen, and everyone knows exactly what's going to happen, but it still feels like this like system that's independent of like its participants.
Yep.
And it's interesting to me, not only because you can watch that kind of thing happen and watch just general grouping trends happen like all over the place. But also in that it's the same thing if you just abstract it up and up. Like abstracting it up doesn't actually get rid of like I don't know the word for it. I don't know. I'm still thinking through all this. But what I think is really interesting is that we have 19 million high school students a year in the U.S., and that number is irritatingly hard to nail down. Well, not a year, but 19 million total high school students right now in the U.S. That number is hard because no one seems to know whether we should count like private schools and homeschooled and blah, 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 but that's plus or minus a million, whatever. And a fairly significant percentage of them don't like showing up to school every day, which we're societally cool with to like a weird extent. Like there's not really any other instance where like the target user of your product or your student like doesn't like it and you don't care. Like it's weird.
Work is a little bit like that for a lot of people, I think.
Not to the same extent though, because you have a say. There are free market forcings on it where another job could go create a better work environment, or you could quit, or like you have options. And there are incentives for your employer to care what you think, to an extent. I mean, certainly more than there is in a school. So this is just a broad thing I've been playing with and then here's the other thing. So I recently, this just got announced, and I'm super happy I can talk about it, joined the board of this nonprofit called Student Voice. And they're the freaking best. I love them. Me and them are working on a bunch of fun things. They started off with this Stu Voice Twitter chat on Monday nights a couple years ago, which ended up blowing up, hitting a couple million people. They got Arnie Duncan in on a Twitter chat and a bunch of like fun, neat things. And partway through this, they realized, they being this kid Zach, who's at University of Maryland, and a couple of his friends were the ones who started it. But they realized that there was surprisingly little outlet and surprisingly little reason for students to be self-aware. Like, a self-aware high school student who like actually thought critically about the system and actually cared had very little place to go with that energy, which I see as a huge problem, and that's a big thing I've been kind of looking into. But Student Voice is based on the premise that I think it was Gallup or someone who did this polling, but they're legit numbers of like 36% of high school students feel like they don't have a voice in the decisions that impact their lives and their education, which ups to like 40-something% by senior year, which both is a depressingly big number in the first place and is also super weird that it increases as kids get older and theoretically more mature. But Student Voice is kind of based on the idea that that is a problem. So they're doing a bunch of fun things, from the Twitter chats, which is kind of phasing out. They're doing lots of great stuff of curriculum design and incorporating it into civics curriculums, and we've got a bunch of pilot programs going on at various schools in New York and different districts, as well as lots of in-person events. We just did Student Voice Live in New York, which was super fun. And then we've got, well, they hooked this up. They wouldn't even tell me because blah, blah, blah. They're like, fancy schmancy board, separation of info, and I'm like, fine, but I want to know what's going on. It sounds really fun. We've got a sweet partnership with South by Southwest EDU.
Nice.
We're doing a whole event there. We've got partnerships with Dell, with Microsoft, with Skype, with lots of fun folks, and a bunch more on the way that I can't say yet, but that are super legit and fit really well. So I'm working with them and trying to kind of just learn as much as I can about kind of the nonprofit-y, student-driven-y side of the space. Have also been kind of consulting with a variety of EdTech folks here in the Valley. Talking to lots of
interesting in EdTech that you see right now?
Interesting in terms of like products I'm keeping an eye on, and in terms of like the industry as a whole.
The ideas. Are there any interesting ideas going on with fixing the education system?
So I'm trying to think. Like, there's lots of stuff I've heard whispers about that. Like, I'm trying to remember what's announced and what like people are ready to share. One thing that's constantly odd to me is I've been sitting in on more and more like EdTech pitch meetings and stuff with investors and that kind of thing to try to get a sense. And Like, if I were to chart the number of times I hear the word student in most of these, it would be depressingly like 1 or 2 or 0.
Yeah.
And just the pure lack of actual student perspective in a lot of the work going into EdTech, like, is super weird. And sure, there's some places where it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, if you're dealing with the intricacies of selling to a district or getting this thing through teachers union bureaucracy or something, yeah, whatever, that's not relevant to students. But, like, when you're talking legit B2C and no one's listening to students, that's really weird. There are a couple of companies that I think are doing a really good job of this. Remind 101, now I think just called Remind. They're building this super dope messaging platform that's doing really well. I'm obviously a big Khan Academy fan. The whole MOOCs of Coursera and Udacity and Treehouse and blah, blah, blah is kind of another story. I like some. I like some of the model. I think that there's a lot preventing it from really replacing anything. And I think if we keep looking at those type of models as more and more, what's the word for augmentation-y? Augmentative? Is that the word? Yeah, that.
Close enough.
Whatever. That's kind of a better way to look at it. As for just, deeply entrenched incumbents, like, Blackboard is a good example of what happens when you are so locked in and you just don't have to, like, care about your users that, your product suffers and the actual use case that you serve isn't served very well. And, like, I'm friends with some former Blackboard guys, so please don't yell at me, but me and them have talked about this, and, like, I've learned a lot from kind of what they have said and their thinking on it. I mean, I talked to them about why they had such high penetration in colleges but never really got locked in high schools. And it's funny because I see this pretty consistently. Like, every day I see a new startup that's like, we're going to reinvent preschool and we're going to reinvent college. And I'm like, but that's here and there's this middle thing. I'm not sure why this is. I think it's because high school is such a, at this point, like, public and governmental system that everyone feels like addressing anything high school becomes a political problem, whereas college is, like, nonprofit, normal economics apply for the most part, and preschool kind of the same. Or if it's just because, like, everyone remembers and feels close to college and realizes they're, like, about to have kids in preschool and should probably do something about that. And no one's close enough to high school, which is where I think I have a really unique value prop.
Do you have an idea for how to fix high school?
I think I'm playing around with a lot of things. I've been playing around with, like, 5 different things and trying to figure out how they might all fit together. I think the core of it, to me, is trying to utilize the, like, self-awareness of students towards something useful. There's lots of great research being done on, like, the impact of learning communities on intrinsic motivation, and there's surprisingly little ways to match a frustrated student to a bunch of cool existing learning communities. That's something I think could be a neat space to explore. I think for the most part, it's just that all these high schoolers are so deeply close to the problem that they know what to do and no one cares. So that's more of a, like, just statement than it is a problem or a solution. And I guess that's what I'm struggling with, is how to take it to one of those. But I know this is what I want to be working on.
That's awesome.
Because Finish, so, I mean, I'm still working on Finish. Don't get me wrong, Finish is still a huge priority. We just launched a big update for iOS 8. A bunch of fun stuff is on the way, all that. But to me, Finish is a kind of an initial experiment in kind of the much bigger idea for me of what can we do both with high school students that are motivated and how can we build software and technology to help them be or stay or take less resources to be motivated.
It's kind of a proof of concept that an app for high school students can empower them to do more.
In a less direct way, it's a proof of concept. I mean, to me, it was just like and I didn't think of this at first.
Yeah.
A little bit more. I was thinking about this at the beginning more than I've like talked about publicly yet. And I kind of want to clean up that narrative a little bit before I go really public with it. But yeah, in a way, it's kind of a proof of concept. It's less a proof of concept as like a teaching myself a little bit about it.
And is that how you differentiated Finish? Is by focusing narrowly on one under addressed segment of the population? Because it's like there's thousands of to-do lists.
That's what we should have started, but we didn't. And this was because I was kind of dumb and thought that like Finish does work for everyone. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Marketing yourself as that is hard.
Yes.
And takes way more resources than we had. So for a while I was trying to be like, Finish is just the best thing for everyone and it's awesome and I'm a little 16-year-old and write about me, which did work. And I mean, it worked.
Yeah.
But it took me a couple months of talking to users, looking at response, talking to people to realize that like that's not real marketing. Like, and that so back in, and I started shaping it more and more to high school students because one, going back to what I said earlier, that's the space I really cared about in the first place.
Yeah.
And I like pretended to be too grown-up-y so that I could feel like I was like applying to everyone. And don't get me wrong, I mean, we have huge Finish usage among doctors, lawyers. It's huge among freelancers, you know, tracking client projects. Like we've seen great response. But, you know, I built it knowing high school. And the only thing I can say I knew it worked for before we launched was high school. So we've kind of shaped more and more towards that. In August of last year, we launched a big 2.0 update around back-to-school time, integrated some really cool rewards with this company called Keep, which targets really well the high schoolers. And then we went free back in March, and we've just seen huge explosions since then in usage and growth, which has been great. And yeah.
Awesome.
I think it's ended up getting a similar result, but it would have been much easier and it would have felt much more strategic, and it would have been much more strategic if instead of going like everybody in high schoolers and like it kind of sucking down into high schoolers and like still some remnants of everybody,
yeah,
versus like being like high schoolers and then like it nicely flowing up.
Like Facebook starting out with
to do that.
Kind of like Facebook starting out on one college campus and spreading out.
Totally. Yeah, sure.
If you can now tell your 16-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Be less confident that what you're worrying about are the right things to be worrying about.
Oh yes, that's a good one.
Yeah, like I would be super worried about this bug or this launch planning or something like that, and it was good in that I was worried about it and that I really cared about it, but I think I wasn't smart enough of like distributing my like worry and what I really cared about to the right things, and I wasn't especially good at realizing when I should change those.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because taking something that I was like really worried about and changing to being worried about something else felt like I did the first thing wrong. In the sense of like, I'm really worried about this bug. But now actually that's not a big deal. Made it feel like I got lazy versus I was actually being more strategic. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I think I think anyone who's building products struggles with that. But I don't think I had the self-awareness. But also you could just say, hindsight, anything I say now will sound smart.
And where can people follow you to learn more about what you're doing with education or hear about new?
I've actually got some fun stuff I've been writing that'll be out soon on a variety of publications. Mostly just Twitter is at Orbuch, last name Orbuch, and it's down in this funky little thingy-majiggy. But yeah, Twitter is, I'm a huge Twitter fan. I'm obviously on Facebook and LinkedIn and stuff. I don't understand LinkedIn, but I'm on it. Me too. I just clicked stuff till I got the 500 plus, and I'm like, okay, now I don't have to care anymore. I just add everyone on Facebook. It's much easier. Yeah, basically Twitter is the best way to keep an eye on everything. Email is just ryan@getfinished.com. Feel free to shoot me whatever. I have gotten a depressingly huge increase in volume these days, and there's a bunch of companies I'm helping out with stuff. But totally shoot me a note, and I'll do whatever I can. And then, just trying to figure it out.
Great. Well, I really appreciate picking your brain, and understanding how you think about problems, I think, is really helpful. So I really appreciate your time, and thanks for hanging out and sharing with us.
Cool. Thanks again for having me, man. Really appreciate it. Awesome.
Thanks for listening to the Craftsman Founder podcast with Lucas Carlson. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, craftsmanfounder.com, to your friends and colleagues. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a Craftsman Founder production. Join us next time for another edition of the Craftsman Founder podcast.